All right, folks, welcome to the Citizen Ed Takeover. Today, we grace the stage with the Riverhead Charter School, my school, our school, fellas. How does this feel for you guys? Nick, tell the people about yourself.
Oh man, I'm happy to be here. I'm the director of academics, Riverhead Charter School. We're K-9 school in Calverton, New York.
Yeah, but nah, you can't just tell these people who you are, like where you came from, bro.
Come on, you want my whole bio?
Not the whole, just like the last 4 years.
Well, consulting until coming here. And before that, other charter schools, like 20 years in the charter world and 8 years in Patterson Public Schools before that. And just about every role you could hold in a charter school I've held. And now I'm kind of like in the twilight of my charter school career in a really great place with a really great job. I like being part of the decision-making process, but not the decision maker. Like I've done that. I'm really happy to just implement the great plans that we all come up with over here.
That's what's up. Dr. P, tell these folks who you are, bro.
Yeah, excited to join. So I am the middle school principal and in the process of opening the high school. So this coming year, we'll be opening up 9th grade to our students. So I'll be doing that. Prior, I have a mix of public and charter school experience. I started my career as a founding first grade teacher, kind of worked my way up and have held a variety of positions across both.
Well, welcome, fellas. Welcome. This platform, man, this is his baby. So it's kind of like when your big brother has like a Cadillac and he's like, he just bought it, and you're like, yo, let me drive. And then he's like, all right, fine, here's the keys. All right, so I will try not to wreck his show. All right, so today we're talking about equity in remote learning. Let's define equity. What does equity mean to you guys?
So equity means fair. I mean, how do we make it fair for all of our students have a fair shake at their education, no matter what their situation? And we had a wide variety of situations, and we kind of jumped into this in March, like, whoa, you got 2 days to make this happen. So it was tough. It was a struggle, but equity means just making it fair for everyone, no matter what their situation.
Dr. P.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that really a big part of equity when talking about, and we'll get into it, but talking about equity in this online platform is really about access and support for the individual. And so right away, we look at it as like, what can we do to make sure that all of our students have access, make sure that all of our students can be successful, and that it's fair for everyone, understanding that in different situations, people have different opportunities, have different in those situations. So what can we do to kind of ensure that for them?
Yeah. So what were some of the tech needs that you were seeing from the parent side?
Patrick, you take that.
Can you say that again?
The tech needs, like what were some of the
So we were very fortunate that we kind of were a couple years ahead and made sure that we had the Chromebook set up. So a couple of years ago, we went and said, hey, listen, we understand that there's a digital divide and we need to make sure that our students have access to computers. So we had computers within the school. So right away, we made sure that all of our families had the same computer. Everyone had the same Chromebook, because we realized that some families didn't have computers at home. They just had smartphones. Some families didn't even have smartphones. So we were able to right away make sure that everyone had Chromebooks, which was huge for us. And then it was a question of like internet. That was huge. Some families didn't have internet, and some families said they had internet, and you go to get them on the computer and they don't have the bandwidth to be able to have a live video while also working through a Google Doc. And so that was huge. And then I think the other one is just knowledge base around technology. Some families and some students can jump in and right away navigate a computer, navigate an online platform, whereas other families just don't have that skill set. And so it's a lot around what we can do to make sure that everyone can access that material.
Yeah. So in terms of skill set and building capacity, there's some things that, we probably learned in the spring that are gonna make us a lot better in the fall. So like what are we doing to like build capacity for parents that didn't have that knowledge base?
Yeah, I think so. What we did in the fall, or what we did in the spring that worked well, was we kind of did it through the students, being that they're in middle school, and we were able to do that. So we said, okay, well, let's get them in. The first week was really around like, this is the Google Classroom. You've seen it before. Let's talk about what it's going to look like in this platform. And really the support we gave was through the students, and we had to build their capacity because that's who we had access to. Right away, we're already talking about, we've got professional development coming in a couple of weeks. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be bringing families in the safest way possible for parent trainings so that they can go through the same process. They can understand what this looks like. They can understand how to see when their students working, to see that their students completing work. That, you know, if we wanted to set up a Zoom conference with a group of parents, they would know how to log in, how to use it just like their child does.
Patrick, I came up with a name for that. We're going to call it the training tent. We're going to put a big tent up in the back so we can do this outside, so it'll be more safe. And we'll have, you know, half of a 6th grade class come in with their parents and sit outside under the tent and really help them understand how to use the computers and our expectations for how we want them to be presenting themselves when they're online this year. Like in the spring, anything kind of went. Kids are in their bunk beds, kids are at the kitchen table, kids are all over the place, right? But this fall, we're going to really set the expectations that mom and dad or Anna and grandpa or whoever's watching, you got to really provide a space where a kid can work and maybe have like a blank wall or a screen or something behind them, so we're not like intruding in the whole life of the family, because we really don't want to do that. But we want the kids upright and focused and like maybe just wearing the top half of their school uniform or something. But we'll set all those expectations so it looks a little bit more like school than it did in the spring.
Yeah, and we've been talking a little bit. I think that what's also going to be an interesting challenge for us is this past year we went halfway through the year, if not more so. And so we already built relationships with the students. We knew the students, they knew the culture, they knew the expectations. And what's good is our 5th graders know the expectations of our K, soon to be 9 school. But things are a little different in middle school, especially on a digital platform. So really having this training tent, as it's so nicely coined, is going to allow us the ability to start that process with our 5th going into 6th graders, as well as any new teachers getting to know students and teachers who may be teaching new grade levels to be able to get to know those students, because I think that's going to be a learning curve that we're trying to get ahead of.
Yeah, so but I'm gonna push you guys because we're talking about space and we're talking about access, but like a lot of not a lot. I don't know to say a lot. I don't want to miscategorize what people have and what people don't have. But like, what are we gonna do in the instances in which there is no space to where there's a blank wall, and that the only like logical space is that bunk bed space?
Well, so like, come on, a card table, a chair, and hang a sheet from the frame of the bed. I mean, you know, it's like schools have to do a ton. We have to be so flexible, and we have to do a ton of things that we're not normally used to doing. You know, families going to have to do that too. Jobs are going to have to do that. Jobs are going to have to be flexible with their parents. Parents are going to have to be flexible with us. We're going to have to like solve all these problems together. But there's a way. I mean, there's a way. I mean, in the spring, I was working out of what was like basically an oversized closet, you know, but, you know, I made it work.
Right. And like you said, it's working together. Like, we're not going to leave these kids and be like, listen, I want a blank wall. You got to be 6 feet from the wall. This is like, no, we're going to hop. Like, if a kid says, I can't do it, we're going to hop on a Zoom that day with that student. And we're going to be like, okay, walk me around your room. What can we do here? Let's get mom on the call. What can we do here? Like, let's just get you a professional space so you're in the mindset to be a scholar and you're in the mindset to learn.
Yeah. So there's an interesting comment from one of our super parents, Miss Toya. She says, how about meeting parents where they are? So like, what is it when you guys hear meeting? So we talk a lot about meeting kids where they are in terms of like academics and just like where they are to bring them where you want them to be. So when you hear the statement of meet parents where they are, like, what does that mean to you guys? And like, what are we going to do?
Well, first of all, tell us where you are, and we will meet you. I mean, let's be specific with our questioning. Tell me where you are, and we will meet you. Patrick and I have even talked about why can't we run a class in the evening? I mean, if there's no way a kid can be supervised and be remote during the day, if we have a group that needs an evening class, I know some of our teachers who would jump at the chance to teach an evening class instead of a daytime class because they got kids at home that are online learning. So let us know where you're at, and we will meet you. I mean, we'll do our very, very best. That's our culture here. We'll do our very, very best. And even with our social workers and our dean, they'll go out. We know a little bit more about the virus and how to protect ourselves and how to use PPE and like how to have interactions with people and still maintain safety. We can go out, to the houses, and we can figure stuff out, and we can do a lot.
Yeah, I know when we were struggling with getting some of the families the internet through, we were working with Optimum, I guess, at the time. We were making phone calls for parents. We were getting them connected to people. And so like by the time the parent had to call again because they couldn't get through the first time, they would make that phone call and they would know who to call. They know what to say. We were almost scripting for some of these families. So it's really just like, what do they need and how can we support them there? It's really all hands on deck and, communication.
Definitely. All right. So, so the transition to online learning in the spring, it was quite the event. What do you guys recall from it? And what were some of the takeaways from the spring?
My interaction with you, Mr. Ankrum, on a Sunday afternoon. Like the school closed on Friday, and the weekend we were on conference calls because the kids were going to start remote learning on Wednesday. And so me, in my tech savvy way, I'm thinking, oh, okay, we're going to get some cameras and some tripods, and teachers are going to record lessons, and the kids are going to watch them and do worksheets. And then it was like, no, dude, we're doing Zoom. I'm like, what? We're doing live lessons with 25 kids on a computer, all watching and paying attention. And it was just like so out there for me, but so exciting to learn how to do it and to be a part of it and to like go in the classroom as a director of academics and coach teachers in that platform. I mean, Zoom is controversial, all right? There's that whole aspect of possible invasion of privacy, but it is, if we're going to do remote learning, it's got to be students in front of teachers. And I mean, this asynchronous style of learning where kids are looking at videos and then doing worksheets, I mean, it's got its place, but it's not as effective as the synchronous type of learning that happens on Zoom when everyone's learning together at the same time, even though we're spread over 16 districts or however many districts we cover.
Yeah. All right. So Ms. Toya is back in the comments, and she's making a statement with regards to Philly and their internet service. So Ms. Toya, here's my question to you. You guys you guys live where Comcast is headquartered. Go out there and picket. Riot Comcast, Xfinity, or whoever they are until they give you our internet service. But until then, we about to carry this show on, and we about to talk about the things we're doing in Riverhead, New York. All right. So, Pat, what Dr. P, what was your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go from the rollout to the teachers because I think that was a bit wild. So we basically came in on Monday, and the teachers didn't really know what to expect, and we had to go up and say, hey, listen, we got this crazy idea. We're going live, full schedule, instruction, using Zoom. Google Classroom is going to be your platform for material. Trust me, we've done a lot that, we kind of know where we're coming from. Let's make this happen. I said, take an hour, get yourself set up. I'm going to answer questions, and we'll go from there. And so what we found out quickly was the teachers went into the building, and by the time I got into the building, hour and a half later, they were all in different rooms around the building in Zoom chat, having conversations. How can we make this work? What are our features? And they really just jumped into it. And I think it comes to having that culture within your building first, because it goes a long way. There was some pushback, but you have those conversations. Listen, let's give it a shot. It's our only option. And if we don't do this, our kids are going to miss learning. And that's not going to work for any of us. We need to make sure that learning continues. The first few days were a little bit bumpy. I think we were like day 4 in, and all of a sudden internet started kicking and Zoom was kicking everyone out. And about a week and a half in, Zoom changed their policy and everything needed a password, and we couldn't get kids into classrooms for a day, roughly. And so it was a matter of our team being really flexible. We met every morning. We had conversations. Hey, listen, this is what's working. This is what's not working. Let's try something out. And, having a good team around you makes this possible. Having the trust within your team makes this possible, but you've got to be flexible. You've got to listen to your stakeholders, and you got to basically say, like, this is the dream. Let's make it happen.
Yeah. So you talked briefly about teachers and teachers being flexible. Let's talk about our teachers, our amazing teachers, some of them that are in the comments. What's going on, Riverhead Charter School staff, for coming out and supporting your people. What were some of the flexible things that you saw from our staff?
I mean, the fact that I was able to say to them, hey, we're doing this on Wednesday, and they did it right there, just shows to show how awesome they are. They really turned the world upside down. They had to learn, how to do this while having their families right next to them. They had to be able to adapt. A good example is we started breakout rooms within Zoom. And it was, it came to my attention. We sat down after session one day, sat down with a group of probably 5 of us and said, okay, well, we got this new thing called breakout rooms. It came from a teacher. Let's test it out. Let's see what it's about. So we did that. We spent an hour just clicking through, testing. This is what a breakout room is. I brought it into Huddle and said, hey, here's a breakout room. Could be really good for your learning. I know we're talking about really struggling to get our students engaged in the larger group. Let's test it out. We modeled it during a huddle before school started. I said, listen, test it however you want, try however you want. And I can tell you within a couple of days, it was in every single classroom. The teachers took it, they ran with it, they owned it, they made it their own. If teachers had ideas, they were sharing it with one another, they were passing ideas along, they were modeling and teaching during huddles, and really just like basically said, like, this is a new world and I'm ready to roll with it. And they did. You can't do it without the staff we have. You really have to have a team there. And if you don't have a solid team all there, it's going to be a little bit more bumpy, and you just have to know the way to navigate that.
Yeah. Nick, you coach them. What's happening?
Yeah. I mean, I did do a lot of coaching, and I'll be quite honest. We held back a little bit and too critical of feedback because this was so new to everyone. We just wanted to make sure that the content was getting across in whatever way we could get it. But another way that teachers were so flexible was, once we had these breakout rooms, the ability of our special ed teachers to pull a group, right? So they could push into a classroom after the mini lesson and then go into a breakout room and support our special ed population. Our ENL teacher was in the rooms all the time, able to go into a breakout room. ENL teachers teaching on off times, like during lunch or in the morning when she could get access to her kids when they weren't in their regular classroom. So everyone stepped up. It was just, it was wonderful to see and totally expected. I didn't expect anything else, having worked with these teachers for a while. So it was a pretty amazing experience.
Yeah. So, man, it's interesting that you touched on special education, because I don't think anybody is doing special education well, especially on an online learning platform. So, like, how do you guys feel like we're transitioning and addressing the needs of our SPED students, and how are we looping parents in to kind of help them navigate through this pandemic?
I think we have the time now this year in building the schedule and hiring teachers and making it absolutely imperative that the special ed students receive their services. It's going to have to be in the middle school. It's going to have to be through Zoom, and we'll have to use breakout rooms, and we'll have to have Zoom special ed meetings. We had those in the spring. We had all of our required special ed meetings with the districts and our teachers on the Zoom platform. So those things will just have to continue. We can start thinking about, since in middle school we're doing remote, we will have some space where we could possibly bring in selected students occasionally to give them additional support that they may need, because we'll be able to social distance and meet all the protocols required by the state. So that's an option that we're definitely looking at for the fall, is bringing selected students in who are struggling mightily on the Zoom platform and giving them some in-person attention.
Yeah. So that's one thing that we definitely need to talk about. We definitely need to broach this, because, you know, for the folks in the schools that are transitioning into 100% online learning, not every kid is going to learn that way. Not every kid is going to learn from a Zoom platform or platforms that involve online learning. So what are we going to do? And Nick, you kind of touched on it, but Dr. Pat, more specifically for you, what are we going to do to catch those struggling learners to make sure that they don't fall through the cracks?
Yeah, I mean, that's goal number one this year, right? I think that we were able to access every student to a degree. There was a percentage of students that we didn't have to the percentage I would have liked to, but it's going to be exactly that. It's going to be, what do we need to do to get that person there? I think we know a lot more about the virus now, so we can be able to understand what we're doing with PPE, and, you know, if that means we got to pop into the person's house, knock on the door, take 5 steps back, and navigate some of the stuff with them, we will. If it's that their service can't be accessed virtually, we do need to look into maybe bringing those students into the building to receive those services. I think what we did well was we worked with what we had this past year. So, like, I can name, there was one student that every day at the end of the day, she didn't go to advisory in the morning. She would start with first period, but at the end of the day, she'd stay after with a teacher for 30 minutes every day and work with that teacher, because she wasn't able to process it all unless she was able to work with someone separately. So every single day, that teacher met for 30 minutes after the school day let out to meet with that student, to go through everything, to answer questions, to make sure that she can do some learning on her own, to make sure that she had it. And they were just flexible with her during the day, understanding that, like, sometimes it was overwhelming, sometimes she had to step out for a couple minutes. There's no judgment there. She still got her work done. She just needed it a different way. And I think it's, you know, the same as when they're in the classroom. We have to be good about understanding that students are at different places and they need different supports, and we just have to do that. But being able to access some more of that face-to-face, especially for services that need that, is going to be huge to making sure we're meeting those students' needs.
And we did this for 3.5 months. So, like, we kind of know the students that struggled with the, it was really kind of interesting, because there were some students who in live school, were very introverted and not very participatory in the classrooms. And then on the Zoom platforms, they were the total opposite, right? And then there were kids who had the opposite situation to that. But we were really able, I know Patrick can name the kids easily that really struggled with the Zoom platform, but we could be ready to deal with them in the fall.
Yeah, so guys, there's an elephant in the room, and we gotta tackle this elephant in the room, because I feel like we're aligned in terms of, like, our thinking, but I don't think that a lot of people are. So Georgia, they made a decision to cancel standardized testing for the whole year. Where are we on that?
You know what? I don't know. It depends on the grade to me, because I think in our elementary, if we go with an A-B situation and kids are not getting 5 days of instruction a week, we are not going to be able to teach to the depth needed for them to excel in the standardized test. If we use a standardized test as, you know, a benchmark for how kids do in a remote learning situation, that's different. I think in middle school, because kids will be getting 5 days of instruction, I think we'll be okay. And I think, you know, I think that the standardized test in New York anyway could happen. I just worry about our 3 to 5 population and how we could possibly teach to the depth we need to with only 2 or 3 days of live instruction.
Yeah. I mean, I struggle with it on both ends. Like, I understand the struggle to have standardized testing, especially because you're looking at some of these initial plans roll out and you're talking about 100% online, but not being able to do live instruction. I understand that there's a lot of schools that are like, listen, we're going to do 2 days in person for part of the time, and then they're going to learn on their own 3 days a week. Like, I understand that there's going to be gaps on how we assess students. And I understand that, like, logistically, it may be very difficult to test students if you can't get them in the building, or at least it would be a lot of money for them to figure out how they want to do that. But now we're not monitoring student progress, and we're basically saying, listen, everyone's just doing what they do. It's a question around standardized testing, I guess. But then, you have students who are not testing, and we've not seen where progress is. And, that brings up a lot more questions for me. And that's kind of the balance there. It's tricky.
Yeah. So for me, guys, I think that standardized testing needs to occur. This would be the first year of new testing in New York State. And so I feel like as long as it's not punitive and that we can use this year's scores as baseline scores for when we do get back into the classroom and when things do get back to like this new normal that we're talking about, even though I think that the new normal is going to look more, it's going to be more flexible in terms of incorporating online learning into your learning programs. I just think that this year should probably be a baseline kind of year. Now,
it's an artificial baseline, right? It's an artificial baseline.
Yeah, you're right. It is.
But,
I never thought of that.
Yeah.
Talk about that. So when you say artificial baseline, what do you mean?
It's not only baseline for a new test, it's baseline for an entirely new way of teaching. So like, how can you compare what happens in a baseline if we test it this spring, and then God willing, we all come back into the building for the full of next school year? That's just a whole different thing to compare. What is the effect? It's interesting. I mean, I'm sure there'll be a ton of reports written about how the scores were compared to virtual and in person. But it's just, to me, it's, it's artificial, because and there's just going to be too many reasons for people to say it's not fair. How can you hold teachers accountable for these test scores when they're having to teach from a platform that some of them have never taught before? Veteran teachers who have never done this. I mean, there's just going to be so much pushback. I just think it's artificial. As I'm sitting here talking about it, and I don't know. You know what? In 3 weeks from now, someone could tell us that we can't do any of this. Who knows what's going to happen with this virus? But I mean, we're talking like everything's set in stone. Like, we have our plan, and this is what's going to happen in September. It's a month away. God knows what's going to happen in a month, right? The way things have been changing lately. But if we can't bring the kids back into school in a traditional setting, then I don't think we can do a traditional testing season. It's just artificial.
Yeah. So there's a comment, and it talks about authentic teacher-based assessments are where it's at. And so to hell with that. I'm gonna tell you that right now. To hell with that. Because because you can't make the argument of standardized tests are racially inappropriate and racially biased, and then not talk about the biases that exist in teacher-made assessments. I mean, it's there. It's the elephant in the room. So it's like, you got to address like both issues. But again, I think that using it as a baseline and as a benchmark, it gets us critical information in terms of like the learning platforms, in terms of like, how the scope and sequences were followed, because we do a lot of outside of the box thinking in terms of how we come up with our data. I think that the way that we assess and the things that we put in place, we already know what the state test scores are going to be prior to them even coming out. We're like pinpoint accurate. You guys want to describe like what we do?
Yeah, I mean, we use a variety of things. We align all our test questions. We include assessment questions that are at the same rigor, so we really know how students are doing at that rigor of questioning. We provide benchmarks throughout the year to kind of see student progress, identifying what they've learned up to that point, previewing some of what they're going to be doing. And we use those to really guide where we are. I mean, we have a good understanding of what students have mastered standard-wise before they even step foot into taking a test, based upon the assessments that we've done. But it takes a lot of work on the back end. Like, I think when you talk about authentic teacher-based assessment, you talk about, having high-quality materials from teacher-created assessments. It's just a question of if that's equitable across schools. In our case, I feel like it aligns to the standard, which is the standard-based test, but you don't see that everywhere. There's a lot of schools that have inflation. You look at other states that have testing, and they get these great scores on their state tests, and you get to the national assessment and they do terrible. Well, then that's a question of like, how low have we dropped the bar? And I always worry about that. And so what we do is we really just try to make sure that we're meeting the bar that's been set, and that we're checking that progress throughout to make sure the students are mastering those standards.
And let's not forget, I mean, test prep is test prep, and tons of schools do it similarly and do it well. But I think the one thing that we do differently has to do with our curriculum. We're using a Singapore math curriculum for math, and it's really problem-solving based. So we're not, that there's teaching how to problem solve, and there's teaching through problem solving, right? So teaching how to problem solve is you teach a unit on ratios, and then at the end of that unit, you give the kids some problems to solve, and guess what? You have to use a ratio to solve all those problems. Well, that's no surprise. You just taught us everything about ratios. But if you're introducing topics in a problem-solving setting, and the students don't know exactly what they have to use, but they have some prior knowledge, just doing that every day throughout the course of a school year sets them up to do well on the testing. And in our language arts program, it's just a separate writing piece that they have, and our New York State test is very heavily, ELA-based test is very heavily reliant on the ability to write. So we spent a lot of time having kids writing critically, writing in response to what they're reading. So curriculum, I think, is actually the most important thing in terms of getting kids prepared for a state test, not test prep. Test prep has to be, we have to do it, and we do it, and we probably do everything that most good charter schools do. But I think what sets us apart is we may have a little edge in other schools in terms of what we chose for curriculum.
Yeah, so there's this big criticism on charter schools. They receive really good test scores because they teach to the test. Like, you see Success Academy get killed all the time because they're not creating critical thinkers in terms of in opinion. That's not necessarily my opinion, but an opinion is that these high stakes charter schools are not creating critical thinkers in terms of like how they look at materials. I think we're different because I feel like we teach above the test. You guys want to talk about that?
I think you're right, and I remember my attitude as a teacher, and when I was teaching my students, and they were concerned about state testing, no matter when or where it was, my attitude was always, what's to worry about? Everything that we're doing in class is so much more rigorous and so much more conceptual and so much more than you'll ever be asked to do on a state test. If you can succeed in this classroom and ask questions and learn here, any test that anyone puts in front of you should not be an issue. And that sense of, listen, you have this and you're prepared for it is such an important part for kids' confidence and their ability to understand that I can do this because what I do every day in my classroom is a lot tougher than what I'm being asked to do right now. And it's not just, it's not just a line, it's true. I mean, the rigor of what we do in our classrooms every day does exceed the rigor of what's on a typical standardized test.
Yeah, and it's not being complacent. So I think year after year, it looks a little bit different. So what we taught last year would look different than the next year because every year as a school, we're getting better. We're pushing kids further. So we're diving a little bit deeper. We're pushing that bar a little bit further because we know what students can do. And it's just trying to get them there without drowning them along the way. So it's just raising that bar incrementally, not being complacent, and getting them where they need to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also this idea of teaching to the high bar, like not teaching to the low bar. Like we teach to the high bar, and kids that are kind of struggling and we address them, right? We can't just teach to the lowest common denominator. We need to teach to the highest common denominator, and then help and pull those kids who are struggling behind with additional support.
Okay, so it's funny that you guys should mention that. This is a good way to segue over. What will feedback cycles look like for teachers? Because we broached it a little bit. We talked about we weren't like hyper critical of teachers, given the fact that we just started this. But like, what would a typical feedback cycle look like for teachers now?
To be developed. I mean, we're in our second day back at work, but I've been thinking about it all summer because I struggled so much with it in the spring. But that's what we have to do, and we have to do it when our teachers come back, and we have to do it together with them, and really make them understand, we want you to be comfortable, but we also have to be critical. We have to grow, and we have to learn, and we have to get better, and we can't do that unless we're giving critical feedback. And we have to kind of like find the balance between how many times they want us in their Zoom room and how many times they want to meet. The idea of the kids not being in the school, but the teachers coming in to teach from the school, I think is going to be really, really important and really help us have those feedback cycles, because we can do them in a room. I'm in a big room here, I'm all alone. We can put 4 or 5 teachers in this room, a math department meeting or an English department or a history or science department meeting, and have those feedback cycles that we used to have before we went remote. So I think it's going to be much better. I'm excited to work it out and figure out how to do it along with Patrick and the teachers, and I'm confident that we'll come up with a really good plan.
Yeah, I think in the spring, our idea around teacher support was around like collaborative idea generation, right? So you think about, we're trying to do something innovative and different. We need ideas. We need people to come in. We need to just, okay, what's working, what's not working? Let's try it out. Let's do it as a team. And so it was just like a big team effort of like, let's get ideas out, and then supporting teachers as they want to implement those things. Moving into the fall, it's really about getting back into our coaching cycles. I think we know a little bit more where we can give feedback. We've seen really good online instruction, as funny as that sounds. And I think that it's getting into exactly what we do in the classroom. It's more peer observations. We encourage peer observations. We did PLC-based style peer observations where, hey, listen, why don't you go pop in this room? They're doing this really well. But it's getting into, okay, well, listen, I want you to get in there. Let's have a conversation. We'll observe at the same time. And then I'll give you some feedback on what I'm seeing in their room versus your room, and some things you might want to implement to raise the standard for your students. And getting back into what we do really well from a coaching standpoint. And then just not dropping everything else with this idea generation, because it's still a very innovative venture.
And the thing we talked about, Patrick, that I think fits in nicely here is we may have some, like we talked earlier, that we may have a cohort of students that are going to need to come in occasionally for in-person support in a social distancing setting. We may have teachers that's their job. Like every day they're dealing with a different cohort of kids who come in, because some of these teachers, as much as we coach them, they just may never get comfortable in front of that camera and teaching on Zoom. And if we can find out who those teachers are and work to their strength, maybe those are the teachers that we can use to really support the kids who are struggling with Zoom, right? The teachers struggling with Zoom can help the students who are struggling with Zoom. They have this shared issue, and that they can come together, and that will kind of tie them together in addition to effectively helping those kids.
Man, so I've been able to kind of pop in on Miss Roselli. She's doing the math portion of our summer pilot program. So our summer pilot program, what we did was we got a small group of kids, and we wanted to introduce them to an online learning platform throughout the summer to kind of curb summer learning loss. And so Miss Roselli is our 6th, 7th grade math teacher, and she's pretty freaking phenomenal. And so just checking in on her and watching how the kids are engaging in the learning, I feel like the students and the way that they are adjusting to Zoom is kind of amazing. Like, so for those kids that are shy and don't really want to raise their hand and talk out loud, like they will text their answers.
Chat.
Yeah, and it's pretty amazing. What are you guys thinking about the kids about that element of Zoom, and for the kids that would be like non-participatory or will take the back seat now being engaged in learning?
Yeah, so I thought about that a lot, and it was really interesting to see. You can go to a Zoom classroom and go to that gallery view, and you can see the students where you're only looking at the top of their head, right? And it's kind of, are these kids disengaging, or are these kids really freaked out? They're middle school kids, or they're just really freaked out about being on camera all day, right? That's a little daunting to some students. So we have to be able to determine if kids are disengaging in that setting, or if they're really anxious about being on camera, and being flexible for those students. Like, are they getting the work done? Are they following the lesson as the teacher's teaching? And it's really good because we can follow their work on their Google Doc, right? We can look at all the papers and say, okay, this kid's off camera, but look at him flying through this worksheet with no problem. So are we going to have a big issue that he's not on camera or she's not on camera? No, I think we need to really be flexible, because there are going to be kids who can do the work and will listen and may even chat, right? That there's these whole new buzzwords like, tell me in your chat, give me the answer to number 4 in your chat, right? That's like what you hear teachers in remote learning all the time. And then the teachers can see and the kids can participate that way. So, right, Patrick, flexibility has got to be gigantic for remote learning, because I truly believe that some of these middle school kids are just really freaked out about having everyone look at their face on that gallery view or that speaker view. As long as they're doing the work and participating in the chat, to me, shut your camera and just keep working.
And some of the kids love it, but yeah, it's individualization, flexibility. It's okay. Let's use the chat feature. I think that we get a lot of kids, so we use the breakout room. So now we're putting a kid in a group of 5. What happens in the classroom if you're in a group of 5? A lot of kids, and having conversations with kids, they're uncomfortable. Like, I don't want to be isolated. What if the other kids are staring at me while I'm working in this group? Mm-hmm. Well, it doesn't happen. Like, you're in a different room. You can have candid conversations. I think having both private and public chat, like setting up where like they can answer in front of the whole class, or they can send their teacher a separate message, is huge. And we're doing a lot of research on our end on like what we can do to support that. Like, there's actually a feature on Zoom, and I'm working on figuring out where it is, but thank you to the Twitterverse, I found it, where a student can turn their face off. So they're still sharing to everyone, but they don't see their own face. And that might be it too.
Wow.
Like, it's really hard to sit here and stare at your own face the whole time, especially if you're uncomfortable. If you're in that like weird, like I'm a middle schooler type of stage. But if you can turn your face off, you can see your peers, you can see your teacher can double check on you, but you don't see yourself. That might go a long way for some of our students. And so it's really being creative in like what we're doing to get kids the support, because like Nick said, we have some students who have gone from like this little clamshell of a student who you like spend all day pulling information out of to like, we're like, can we mute this kid for like 3 seconds? Because they're just so into it. One comes to mind, like every 3 seconds. Do you see me? I'm on the computer. Can you hear my voice? Like nonstop. And so it's like being able to like navigate that a little bit. Like now we've got some kids who we never could reach. Now we're going to reach that way. Now we're losing some kids because maybe they're uncomfortable. What can we do to bring them back so that we can get back to, more than maybe what we had before?
Yeah. So you guys mentioned earlier, we talked about the social work piece and just the social emotional piece. Like, what are we doing in terms of meeting parents where they are in terms of providing that kind of access for what we do?
Yeah, I mean, it's constant communication. We set up all our social groups right away. Social workers were meeting with students individually or in groups, and there's things you have to navigate to make sure that that's safe for everyone, but making sure that's in place. We started running clubs, like lunch clubs for kids who needed it, and we had a lot of kids accessing it that maybe wouldn't during the typical school day, who were like doing these challenges. So we had like weekly challenges set up by our social worker, and she'd say, you know, you need to do these 5 things, pop on the Zoom, and she would do like a social emotional scavenger hunt, and they would have to find things around their classroom or around their home, I guess their classroom, find things around the internet, whatever it was, and share it out. And then she was giving away prizes every week. And like, there was a really cool moment where one kid didn't win 2 weeks in a row. So the other kids let the student win and were like, no, it's her turn to win. But like really trying to do those things that happen in the school day and continuing them. If it's a one-on-one, or like we set up conference calls, like there were times that it would be myself, the social worker, the parent, and the kid. And we'd get on a call together just to talk about what's going on, how we can help. And then it's check-ins with the families. We have identified the families who we need to reach out to first. And it's making sure that like we've got weekly check-ins with certain families or daily check-ins with certain families, depending on the time of year, and just being aware of that and being flexible about that.
Yeah. So we got a really good question from Jesse Bergert. I don't want to kill your name. I'm sorry. I've been out of the classroom for years, and yeah, it's not really my fault. All right. So what grade level are you talking about? Any tips for working with kindergartners on Zoom? So yeah, having a kindergartner age child, what I do know is that 1 hour of Zoom compared to being in school for 8 hours it pales in comparison. So I feel like kids that are from K to 2 need to be in person to get the most out of learning. But in regards to making adjustments for that Zoom, I feel like you have to build capacity of those kids in order for them to be able to have extended learning time on Zoom. What do you guys think?
Yeah, so having a first going to second grader, I didn't have the kindergartner, but she's on the younger side of it. She had an online learning platform that ran from 9 to 12. So once again, not a full day. She had some independent work that she did with us after school every day. For her, I think the biggest difference was the ratio of teacher to student. It's really, really, really hard to support 20 kindergartners, 22 kindergartners. If there was a way to bring that ratio down, if that meant that you met with kids in the morning and then in the afternoon, so you got your ratio down to 10 to 1, if you were able to get it lower, if you're able to utilize a teaching assistant, I think that the best way to reach those students is to give them more voice and more time. And the only way to do that is to bring that ratio down. In a group of 24, you're talking to a group of 24 kindergartners. They don't have the attention span for that. My daughter literally would learn for 20 minutes, be off for 10, learn for 20 minutes, be off for 5. And it was just constant breaks, understanding her attention span and just keeping her engaged. But her group was set up as a 10 to 1. And so she was able to do well because of that. And then just using small groups. She had a reading group she would do twice a week, and it was a 2 to 1 reading group. And it was before the whole class started. So it's just being creative with your time. I think if you're in a place where you have to go online, I think that's the only way you can do it, is to be able to work with your ratios. And if that means independent AM, live PM, and then switch it, whatever you've got to do. I think that you're dealing with tough attention spans as it is. Trying to do it with 24 kids is nearly impossible. So you just have to be flexible there.
Yeah, so you gotta that makes sense from Ms. Weiss, one of our kindergarten support staff members. So you must have said something right if you got her agreeing with you, because she don't agree with nobody. Shout out Ms. Weiss. How's Carter doing? Let us know in the comments. All right, all right, so we talked earlier about the night class option. And I look at that as being one of the huge equity solutions, given the fact that we may have parents that, are mandatory workers. What are your thoughts?
I think it's a fantastic option to provide to parents. I mean, we have to first decide and figure out if we have the staff to support it. But I think it's probably, like you said, one of the biggest things we could do in terms of equity, because it's this whole thing. Some kids can be home unsupervised in middle school and manage on Zoom, but many can't. And many parents don't want their kids home unsupervised on Zoom. So if we can offer this opportunity for late afternoon, early evening classes, I think it could be a game changer. And in this building with our teachers, I can, tick off 3 or 4 teachers that I know would jump at the opportunity to do that because of their own home situation. When their significant other gets home, they can handle the kids and then they can teach. I think it's just something that could make a huge difference for our parents and our students.
Yeah,
So-
I think it's looking at the student numbers too. Like, we're going to be calling all the families to see who needs what. But if we've got a 6A and a 6B, we've got 2 sections of 25. There's no reason we couldn't look at potentially making one of those start later in the day. So one starts at 9. One may start much later than that if we have the teacher ability to do it and if we have the student buy-in to do it. And it would give families access, it would give students access, and it would navigate that a little bit.
So I don't know if you guys are paying attention to these comments, but Mr. Freeman, who works with Ms. Weiss, he comes in and he's like, "We had 25 kids and it went smooth." Hilarious. So one of the largest obstacles that charter schools are going to face, especially charter schools that are like charter schools that are in the space that we're in, like in suburbia, transportation. Transportation is going to be huge, especially for those people that don't really have access. So having that online learning piece is going to be essential for us. But if you think about like just being in the city and having to get on transportation or whatever, like what would you guys like? What would your thinking be?
I mean, if
Refine
you want
that, right? Refine that question.
So we're not going to have access to transportation. That's an equity issue. How do we get past that?
it is an equity issue. And you look at a lot of the certain districts can go to their families and say, hey, listen, I need 50% of you to opt out of busing, and they might get a percentage of that to get there. That's not going to be the same in districts. That's a gap. That's a huge gap. That's why it's important to have this continuation of learning, I think. And I also think that some families are going to be scared to enter the schools. And so you're going to have to be able to address that as well, because you can't ignore those kids. And I think that those two are going to kind of fall in the same category. Some families aren't going to be able to access in-building learning because they're not going to have transportation. It's not fair to then give them a watered-down educational program. You have to be creative. You have to open up that space.
Well, and Ray, we're opening a high school, and eventually we're going to have sports teams, right? So we're going to need buses eventually. It might not be a bad idea to get a head start on purchasing some of our own transportation options.
Thanks, Nick, for putting me on the spot. I appreciate that, sir. And we just so you know, parents that are listening, we are definitely looking into busing options.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting quotes from Acme and people that provide busing. It's really expensive, and it's something that we're weighing because we feel like it's important for us to be able to provide those types of things for our students. And in terms of sports teams, we're not doing football because CTE, not doing that.
No football.
So you guys talked about like micro support and macro support. You want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah.
Oh, is that
Yeah.
Yo, go for it, Nick. I know that we've been on this, but
yeah, it's like, it's so hard this managing remote learning as an administrator is very, very difficult. There's so much to watch and so many places to be that you can't just walk to another room. I kind of thinking that why can't we support our building leaders by kind of breaking our school into smaller pieces and have people in charge of the administration of those grade levels, kind of like an internship. I mean, we have a ton of people in this building who have aspirations for leadership. Why can't we give them opportunities to be in charge of K-1, and then another person is doing second and third, just splitting up and making these cohorts. And then those leaders can come together in meetings and talk about what's going on in their grade levels and brainstorm how to support each other. I just think it's a great opportunity to give more individualized support to grade level teachers, parents, and students, and an opportunity to give some of our teachers the ability to have an internship in administration. So it's something we're thinking about. And that's the micro compared to the macro, where the elementary building principal is responsible for K to 5 and the middle school principal is responsible for 6 to 9 in this new remote learning world. Why not support them, right? And kind of make their load a little bit lighter and make it more of overseeing their grade levels. And then they have these interns who are doing the daily work.
Yeah, and it would be different than your typical teacher leaders because the platform's different, the needs are very different. And so like what we found was we spent a lot of time every morning just checking in on attendance, where are students, who do we need to call? And then it was a lot of just delegation of like, here are the 3 people to call these, I'll call this list, and like trying to figure out how we're going to navigate that appropriately. Versus we're now saying like, well, where can we give more point people? Let people kind of take some more ownership to be that point person, especially because we know that there are certain students or certain cohorts of students who need more support. And so how can we best utilize our staff and also give them the experience, the support, and also build them up as a professional?
Well, and like we did it in the summer pilot program. We just have 5th and 6th grade students in the program, and there's 2 of us making calls every day, and it's like easy. It's like just a few calls to make and we can be on top of everybody immediately, and it's working out pretty well.
Yeah. All right. So PD for teachers, what's that going to look like? And so one of the weird things that I'm seeing in the Twitterverse and in the Facebook verse or whatever is that if you have an online learning platform, would it be most appropriate for PD to be online too?
No. We need them here. We need them here, and because Patrick talked earlier about how when one teacher learned something about a breakout room, they could share it with everyone else. And that happened, but it was difficult on the Zoom platform to, have these conversations and to share these techniques, right? Because you'd have to share your screen and someone wouldn't understand it and you'd have to go back and watch it again. For the PD, I really would like to have teachers in the building with social distancing to the max, and we'll be able to do that easily. But I mean, they need PD on Google Classroom, especially in the elementary. They need PD on Zoom. They need to redo their entire scope and sequence because, I mean, how much are you going to be able to teach effectively in this platform compared to what you did in the building? So a lot of scope and sequencing, a lot of Google Classroom, a lot of Zoom, screencast, Flipgrid, all these different ways to keep kids engaged in remote learning. So I think we can bring them in. I think we can keep them safe. There are going to be exceptions. We may have some teachers who are in health situations where they cannot come in, and we'll deal with that on a case-to-case basis. But for the majority of the PD, I think we need to have the teachers in the building.
Yeah, I think
or under the tent. We'll put them under the tent. I mean, it doesn't. And a lot of the
you in this tent.
And a lot of the PD, like Patrick said, a lot of the PD, the second week of PD, we really see as mostly having the parents and kids come in small groups, meeting their teachers, picking up their equipment, getting their supplies, learning their expectations. So that's going to be a huge part of the PD as well.
Yeah, but to kind of build off of that, even though they will be here, I think that we're limited in what we can do in large gatherings. And so I think even our PD is still going to be digital, even if we're in the building for part of the time. I think that it allows us to do some break off. I think that we can have a big, powwow in the back, and we can stand in a circle and go through things. And I think that you can present well. But I also think a lot of the resources, it's hard to teach breakout rooms without teachers getting into breakout rooms. I think it's hard to go through Flipgrid without teachers being able to go through Flipgrid, and I think it's hard to have teachers engage if they're nervous about being in a room with 80 people. And so I think that there's still going to be a part where we'll do a lot of PD virtually, and we'll do breakout groups and stuff like that. But it is beneficial to get people face to face as well. So it's going to be navigating that health side of it while also using the technology and also supporting them where they are.
Yeah. So one of the questions in the comments was, will teachers teach from the building? And I don't know if you guys have like the same thinking with regards to that, but like, what are your thoughts? We'll start with Nick.
I want them to teach from the building if they can. I mean, if they're willing. And I think even in spring, a lot of the teachers are saying, please, can I go teach from the classroom? but we wouldn't let them because of the safety concerns. We didn't know much about the virus. But I think any teachers that are willing and can, I think they should. I mean, they have access to all their materials. They can stand up in front of a whiteboard. They can use their document camera. They can do so many things that would make it look more like a classroom for the students. Now, if teachers can't, they can't. Or if they're scared to, then, we're certainly not going to force them. But I would like to see as much in the building teaching happening as possible.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with our executive producer and why he has to, he probably has on one of those loud shirts and he's paying more attention to his shirt than he is to what's happening on the screen. But anyways, can we go full screen with everybody? So we can get final thoughts, executive producer, sir. All right. So, guys, we're wrapping up. We're coming up on the hour. It goes by super quick when you're talking shop, right? So, what are your final thoughts in terms of moving us forward with equity solutions for learning remotely? Dr. P.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be fluid. That once again, I've used this as like a innovative venture, and that's what it's going to be. But you have to communicate, you have to be flexible, and you have to do what's best for kids. And understanding that what that looks like today may look different a week from now, may look 5 weeks very different. But just having a good team around you, ready to navigate that, ready to make those changes, and just doing what's best.
Yeah, Nick.
It's all about being positive. We're going to be positive. We're not going to let any negativity come into this situation, and we're going to do it. We're going to do it. We're going to do what we got to do, and we'll do the best job that we possibly can.
Yeah. So shout out to Chris and Citizen Ed and the network for allowing us to come on and take over, giving me the keys to the 8-cylinder Cadillac with electric capabilities, because we were working on that carbon footprint. All right. So you guys have been listening to the Citizen Ed Takeover featuring Riverhead Charter School. Thanks, and you have a great day. Peace. Executive producer guy, please stop the live.